A lot of guys like to argue about who makes more horsepower than who, and there's a number of different ways to measure your actual horsepower. On the OEM side, when we talk about power, we're usually talking about SAE engine power, and that SAE engine power is measured here at an engine dyno lab. Now on the forums, a lot of times we'll see people talk about rear wheel horsepower, and there is a difference to us engineers, and we're going to explain that to you in this episode. But today we've been given rare access to our OEM development lab here, and we get a chance to see how that testing is done on even some of our prototype engines. Now I can't show you everything that's going on in this building, but we have been given a chance to come on inside and see what that testing looks like with proper equipment and proper procedures. So come on inside with me, and we're going to take a look at one of our engines running a test and doing actual power measurement on the engine dyno first. So we're here today at our engine dyno facility, and we're in cell number 28. There's obviously a lot of other cells up and down the row here. You might even hear a couple engines running in the background, but we're running the engine only on the dyno today to find out how the engine behaves without the confusion of the transmission or the vehicle attached to it. So you'll see on our engine here, we actually have a ton of wires coming off of it. We measure everything here at the engine dyno lab, and that gives us more data than we would need. We can always throw that data out, but we can't replace it later. The reason why we collect so much data is that SAE testing procedures call out very specific conditions for the test. So we have to maintain constant temperatures and pressures while we're collecting the data. So by measuring everything, we can ensure that we are indeed following the proper SAE test procedure. And that way, when we get a power measurement, it is a valid measurement. These measurements are done in steady state here on the engine dyno, which is a little bit different than how you see it on the chassis dyno. On the engine dyno, we were testing just the engine a moment ago, and what we got out of that was horsepower delivered to the flywheel. So we would actually measure both horsepower and torque right here at the flywheel on the back of the engine. Well, that connects to our transmission right here, and there can be some losses in the transmission, actually quite significant. And in this truck, we actually go a step further down. We have a transfer case because it's a 4x4 system, so turning this takes some additional effort, and we lose a little bit of horsepower here. Moving further down, we get to our prop shaft, and so the prop shaft's got its own bearings, and it feeds the axle and the ring and pinion assembly in here. And finally, what's left after all these guys take their slice of the pie is horsepower that will be available to the tires to accelerate the vehicle. And just to demonstrate this, if we turn this prop shaft here by hand, you can see that the tires are moving, but it takes some amount of energy just for me to move the shaft at all. And if I stop spinning it myself, the friction in the system slows it down to a stop. So in order to keep the vehicle driving down the road, we actually have to make enough energy not only to push it down the road here at the tires, but also overcome all this friction and all these losses in the drivetrain. Now we're here at the chassis dyno. Now this looks a little bit more familiar to everybody in the aftermarket. You guys are used to seeing power numbers that typically come from this. And the power that we're measuring here is actually power at the wheels or at the tires. So the tires are actually going to turn these drums right here. And the amount of force put into these drums times the speed of the drum gives us a calculation for horsepower. But we have to remember what we saw earlier. All that OEM level testing, when we rate engine power, is typically measured at the engine dyno for accuracy, and we have all those power robbing thieves in between, the transmission and the driveline, that each take a little slice of our total engine power and leave us with a little bit less tractive effort at the tires. And this is going to measure what's left at the tires. Now, it's important to you as a customer because that's what you actually get to use to push your car or truck down the road. So when we at SLP are doing development, you'll often see us quote power numbers at the tire in addition to an engine rated power.